Everyone. Welcome to our mini lesson video on inferencing. So this is a word you may have heard of before, but what does it really mean to infer something or to draw an inference? Okay, it's a word that teachers like to use, and it may seem weird or crazy, but honestly, inferencing is a skill that you use every single day. It's what all of us do when we read body language, right? If you saw my face and it was red and I was shouting and I was gesturing with my arms, my eyebrows were all scrunched together, you don't need me to wear a sign saying that I'm angry. You can infer from my behavior that I am angry. So it's a skill that we do all the time. And it's a really, really valuable reading skill as well. So let's talk about what this word means. So if you look it up on the internet or you look it up in a dictionary, it'll come up with a lot of different definitions. But basically, it means to draw conclusions or to come to a conclusion based on evidence. Okay? So that's one definition. Another one, which you won't find so easily by just Googling it, but is to make an educated guess. Now, there's a couple key words in here, right, that I really want to point out. So when you are asked to infer something, right, or when you do it in your daily life, it's all about coming to a conclusion, okay? So, I guess you could say making a guess. But what you're doing is, it's kind of like reading between the lines. You are taking in information, you're taking in facts, and then you're interpreting those facts and you are coming to a conclusion. Something that, in this case, because we're talking about using inferring as a reading strategy, something that the book does not tell you directly. You have to draw that conclusion for yourself. You have to look at the evidence and come up with a new conclusion. That's what inferencing, that's what inferring is all about. Okay? And again, the key word here, other than conclusion, is evidence, or if we like this simplified definition, is educated. Okay, so to make an inference, you can't just make wild guesses based off of nothing that don't make any sense. In order to make an inference, you must use evidence from the story. Okay, evidence from the book that you're reading. Just like, let's say when I gave you that body language example, right? If you looked at my face and it was, again, red and my eyebrows are all bunched together and I'm yelling and gesturing all big with my hands, you would not automatically assume that I was happy or that I was sad, right? Those are guesses, sure, but they don't make any sense. They're not based on the evidence. They're not educated guesses. And the same applies when we are reading and we are inferring. We need to actually use the clues, use the evidence that is given to us in the story to draw those conclusions, to realize things that the story doesn't expressly tell us. So I'm going to give us an example. Okay, so I'm going to move this up on the document camera so we can see what this says. So this is an example of a situation where we can inference. So I'll read it out. It says, splat. Oh, rats, thought Katie, as she stooped to clean up the mess. I hope we have another one. She looked in the fridge and pulled out the carton. One left. Breakfast wasn't ruined after all. And the question is, what did Katie clean up? Okay. So the reason that we have to infer here is because this short little story, it doesn't actually tell us that answer, right? Nowhere in these few sentences does it tell us exactly what she dropped. But there's enough evidence here that we could come up with an inference. We could draw a conclusion. We could make an educated guess based on the evidence, right? So I'm going to look at the evidence in this short little story, and I'm going to start underlining things that are going to help me come to my conclusion of what it is that she dropped. The first word, whatever it is she dropped, made a splat sound, right? That's evidence. Not everything that you drop makes that sort of sound, right? We also know that it made quite a mess that she needed to clean up. Okay, so I'm looking for more clues. They need to know if she has another one. She looked in the fridge. Well, whatever it was she dropped was kept in the fridge. And was pulled out the carton. It was stored in a carton, right? And whatever it was eaten for breakfast. Well, that's a lot of facts. That's really going to help narrow down what it was she dropped, right? If I don't look at the evidence, when I guess about what Katie was cleaning up, I could guess almost anything. I could say, you know what? I think Katie was cleaning up broccoli. That's what she dropped on the floor, right? That would be a guess, but it's not an educated one because it doesn't pay any attention to the evidence. When I look at the evidence, well, broccoli doesn't go splat when you drop it. Broccoli maybe makes kind of a mess, but not much. Broccoli is kept in the fridge, but not in a carton, and is not really normally eaten for breakfast. So broccoli doesn't really make any sense. So I need to start thinking about the evidence, and I need to infer what it might have been. Okay? Now there's a couple of options, but I think the one that makes the most sense is an egg. She dropped an egg. And if I look at that, and when I look at my guess and I look at the evidence, they make sense. In fact, it was the evidence that led me to this inference, this guess that what she dropped was an egg, right? I started with breakfast. What do people normally eat for breakfast? And there's lots of things. People eat toast, bagels, jam, waffles, cereal, right? Eggs, bacon. There's lots of different things that people eat for breakfast, right? But how many of those are kept in a carton? Well, milk comes in a carton, but eggs also come in a carton. Cereal, not so much, right? And I keep looking at the clues. Well, it's stored in the fridge. Again, cereal and bread, you don't really keep in the fridge, but eggs you do, right? Would eggs make a splat sound when she dropped it on the ground? Yeah, they would for sure. Would an egg make a huge mess when she dropped it? Yes, it would, right? And I hope we have another one, right? So she's looking in the fridge. I hope we have another egg, okay? So that answers the how do I know question. But do you see how I use the evidence, right, to draw a conclusion? I came to the conclusion that Katie dropped an egg. This doesn't actually tell me that. It never says the word egg in here. But if I look at the evidence carefully enough, I can come to that conclusion. And you know what? I can back it up with a lot of facts. Eggs are eaten for breakfast. They're stored in the fridge. They're found in cartons. There might be another one. They make a big mess. They make the sound splat when you drop them. It fits all the clues, right? Now, there might be other things that fit these clues. Maybe you're saying, hang on, Mrs. Remington. What about milk? Milk would make a splat sound if you dropped it. Milk would make a mess. Milk is stored in the fridge. Milk is had for breakfast. Milk comes in a carton. The only one that maybe doesn't quite make sense is she's hoping they have another one. Is she hoping they have another carton of milk? Maybe. But so that one doesn't quite make as much sense to me, but you can make an argument for that as well. But there's not a whole lot of other options that would make sense. That would be a educated guess. That would be a conclusion we could base on evidence, right? So that's one example. I'll flip over my thing here, and I'll show us another example. It was 8:30 on Thursday night. Emily stared at the large empty poster board on her bed. Then she looked at the stack of books about Abraham Lincoln on her desk. Emily began to cry. Why do you think Emily was crying? Okay, so I have to ask myself. And sometimes when you're inferencing, it's really important to use your own prior experience. So I might ask myself, okay, if I was Emily, why would I be crying? And immediately the answer that comes to me is that Emily is stressed about a homework project. Now, what makes me think that? Well, I think to myself, you know what? A huge stack of books about Abraham Lincoln. To me, that sounds like times when I've had to do a research project, when I have had to be learning about somebody or something. So I've gotten a whole bunch of books out of the library. And of course, in my day, almost all the research was done in the library and not on the internet, like for you guys. But that sounds like what is going on here. She's got a whole bunch of books about a single topic. To me, that sounds like a school project. And then there's also the whole idea of a poster board, right? So when we look at the evidence, we've got a stack of books about one topic, and we've got an empty poster board, right? I don't know about you, but there's not a lot of adults who use poster board in their regular job and are making those posters about Abraham Lincoln. This really, really sounds like a school project, right? And how did I jump to stressed? Well, we know she's crying, and we know it's 8:30 on a Thursday night. if I wanted to get even more specific about my inference, I would say the project is probably due really soon, like maybe Friday morning. And her poster board is completely empty, and she's got a ton of reading to do to be able to start to fill it out. All right? So that's what inferencing is in a nutshell. Okay, it's drawing conclusions. It's coming up with information, right, that a story doesn't actually tell us, but that there's lots of evidence for, right? Nowhere in this short little story does it tell us that Emily is stressed about a homework project. But you know what? They don't actually need to put that sentence in there because there's enough evidence in here for us to come to that conclusion ourselves. Just like with the egg one, right? It never actually says that she dropped an egg, but there's enough evidence in here for us to come up with that conclusion ourselves, right? So that's what it means to infer. And we do it all the time when we read and in our daily life. We come up with things all the time. So some of the questions that you're being asked in today's assignment ask you to use this skill. They're going to ask you to come up with answers, right? And use evidence to explain why you came up with them. Answers that aren't actually in the story, but that will require you to infer, to draw conclusions from the story based on the evidence. Or in other words, to make an educated guess, right? Which means you might be wrong, right? But as long as you're paying attention to the evidence and you're making an educated guess and you can back up your guess with evidence from the story, you're going to come pretty close to the truth. Okay? And that, in a nutshell, is what it means to infer.